the portfolio, the fund, what you're doing over there. Exciting stuff.
Sure. So we've definitely evolved quite a bit. When we started, because we all built companies in the mobile software space, like ipsh, we focused on investing in and around mobile technology. And so we had a bunch of kind of big wins early, Uber, Airbnb, Admob, Bungle. They're all kind of in and around the mobile ecosystem. And then our funds kind of grew in size, and the mobile internet is essentially the internet now. And so about 6 years ago, we kind of took that filter off. And being engineers, we're still very excited about technical businesses, so we're more interested in investing, we call them technical moats instead of brand moats. So we wouldn't invest in necessarily like a Casper or a Parker or Away, they're all great businesses. We're investing more in businesses that are fundamentally, or the foundation is in science, right? Mm-hmm. is in technology, largely computer science. And so these days it's a lot of machine learning, it's a lot of artificial intelligence, it's a lot of data. And data as a moat is something that's very exciting. But some examples of businesses that we're excited about these days, Fintech, for example, is growing very fast. There's all of these new types of consumer banks for millennials and Gen Z. And there needs to be new types of infrastructure for fintech businesses. So I'm on the board of a company here in New York called Alloy, ALLOY.co. And they basically help these new types of fintech businesses through an API do quick approvals of customers in under 60 seconds, for example, and then also all of the anti-money laundering and anti-fraud as the customer is continues a relationship with a bank. And what's exciting about this business is a couple things. One is we like businesses that have this elegant interface. An API is essentially a developer framework where any developer can interface with a technology just by using a few lines of code. And some of the biggest companies these days are just API companies. There's one called Plaid, if you're familiar with that, and another one called Checker. So pretty much every Uber driver or gig economy worker will have to use Checker, which is a quick kind of background check and credits check to basically become a DoorDash delivery man, Postmates delivery woman, Uber driver, and that's a simple API. Plaid is another simple API that basically connects, you to your entire, financial portfolio, where landlords can use it, financial aggregators can use it, right? So anyway, we like these API businesses. They're very efficient, they're very elegant, and so Alloy is in that category. In general, I think the unsexier the business is, the more exciting we get about it. So verticals like construction, insurance, real estate. Some folks are falling asleep in the background. We love that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right, because these are trillion-dollar markets that are ripe for disruption.
But you have been known to have an ability to find top entrepreneurs, top talent. What do you see in these founders, these entrepreneurs, that separates them from just a regular startup that's going to fail?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think connecting the dots from what I said before, don't fail on our dime, fail on somebody else's dime. I think founders that have done it before are very interesting to us. We love that archetype of serial founders because, again, the second or third time they're doing a startup, that muscle memory makes them create superpowers. We like a founding team a serial founding team, so ideally this founding team has done it together, has done it before, ideally they've done it together. Ideally there's diversity on the team, and that's in skill set, perspective, ideally gender and race contributes to that diversity. That team is full stack, which means they can actually build and ship and sell the product within the founding team. So sometimes it can be one person who's like a bad engineer, but they can do it, and a bad salesperson, but they can do it. That's fine. Because as you raise capital, you end up hiring people better than you. But we like that full stack founding team because if for whatever reason they can't raise money, or the markets turn, they're still building and shipping and churning and and iterating on the product within the founding. There's less contingencies. And so when we talk to founders, a lot of business founders like, how am I going to find a tech co-founder? A lot of tech co-founders like, how am I going to find a salesperson? That takes time. And by the way, it should take time because this is somebody that you're married to for 10 years if it's or more if it's a successful business. And so we're big fans of like these co-founder dating organizations, and there's been so many entrepreneurs that have found their co-founders on LinkedIn, on AngelList, on Twitter, and just jamming about a particular idea or sector.
At Entre,
on LinkedIn Live.
Yes.
Way up there, those people up there met each other right here on LinkedIn Live.
Doesn't get old.
But I think so. Anyway, these are attractive scenarios to us. And by the way, there's exceptions to every rule. There could be a founder who's never done anything, and one founder, and all of a sudden creates a decacorn, and that happens all day long, all the time. But there's some advantage of pattern matching in our business, and now we've invested in about 200 companies, about 140 through Eniac, and then other kind of as angel investments.
Right. So once you identify the prospects of a good entrepreneur or founder, you're ready to invest in them.
Yeah.
You're an expert in growth as well. LocalResponse, you grew revenue over 2,000%. So what do you, when you oversee them, you mentor them, what advice are you giving these entrepreneurs, these founders, to grow their business?
Yeah, I think, at our stage, this is important to remember at Seed, this is what we call pre-product market fit. So the product is still looking for a market.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot of iteration, it's a lot of throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. So we spend a ton of time on customer discovery, which means if you're an enterprise business, making intros to decision makers at dozens of Fortune 500 companies, and just getting feedback from them, just doing interviews with them, like, what is this pain point? Does this solve your pain point? Most likely it doesn't. But if you find a commonality within, say, 10 Fortune 500 companies, then it's probably a business that's worth pursuing, right? And that's for enterprise. For consumer companies, which are a little bit harder to create now because of the incumbents like Facebook and Google, but there still are a lot of opportunities in consumer. It's about literally creating these large kind of beta groups and reading all of the data that consumers are working off of your product. And believe it or not, they're probably not interested in most of the product that you created, but you'll see in the data that there are some semblances of things that are working. And the speed at what you iterate is key to the business. So I'll give you a story. Everybody here has heard of or on Instagram. Kevin Systrom, when he started the company, it was called Bourbon, and it was a cityguide, right? And it was actually not dissimilar to Buzzed or a lot of companies in that space. And what he realized very quickly is that despite all the features and functionalities in the cityguide, folks were actually taking pictures. They were using the photo functionality more than anything else. Mm-hmm. And he saw that early, and he quickly got rid of everything else. He just started cutting everything out and zeroing in on just the photo app.
What was working.
What was working, right? And so that, again, that speed to iteration, that discovery, that customer discovery process is incredibly important. He found product market fit very quickly. Everybody thinks, Instagram was a, $0 to $1 billion exit in 18 months. That was just from post-Bourbon after he had spent years iterating and just focusing on the photo part of it, right? Which, by the way, is worth much more than $1 billion now. But customer discovery is really what we spend a lot of time focusing on. And then it's a lot of business development and sales. Essentially we're co-founders of our investments without the title and the equity. Mm-hmm. We're doing whatever it takes to help them, be in the trenches and get to the next stage.
Right.
That's where we cut our teeth, and that's where we like to play.
It's all positive.
Yeah.
Let's talk about company culture. I think that's important as you build the team, and you have company culture at Eniac. but we put the segment in. It's sponsored by Hugo Team, which is searchable meeting notes connected with your favorite tools. But company culture at Eniac that you share with the portfolio companies, what is that and how do you build that?
Yeah, I mean, I think culture is incredibly important. It changes at different stages of your business. I think 0 to 7 employees is pretty easy to manage. After 7, I remember firsthand in my startups, you have to have somebody thinking about it. And it feels at first a little artificial. Like, why do I have to do this? Why do we have to have this kind of weekly happy hour? Or why do we have these monthly staff meetings or these quarterly offsites? You know, it feels kind of awkward and you know, but those are incredibly important, right? Just getting folks outside of the working environment and even outside of the water cooler conversations and just talking blue sky, you know, over a drink, over a meal. Like those connections and those conversations are incredibly important to the foundation of a company. Because all of a sudden you have engineers talking to sales folks that would never have ever integrated conversations before. And
new ideas are popping up.
New ideas, and they're jamming, they're getting to know each other. And those foundations set companies up for success in a big way. Now, in some situations, I'll talk about the company I mentioned earlier, Alloy, in the fintech space. You know, you can express your company values up front, and it can be very powerful from in a recruiting, as a recruiting tool and a retention tool. You know, these days, top engineers, top talent, period, have so many options, right? Microsoft, Twitter, Facebook, Google, start your own company. You know, folks can go anywhere if you're good. And so, how do you retain folks? And so, embedding the values in the company mission early are incredibly important. So Alloy, going back to Alloy, has a very strong value system in diversity and inclusion. And one of the co-founders is this incredible woman, Laura, and they want half the company to be women. And by the way, in the tech industry, that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
But that's their bar. And so they have worked very hard at that.
That's great.
And because of that, you know, they have incredible company culture, they have incredible retention, they have an incredible recruiting pipeline, right? Because of values that they put up front. So while it might feel artificial in the beginning, after employee 7, like you know, make sure you have somebody focused on it. It should probably be the CEO or the founder. Make sure you're doing these things that might not feel natural, but as you scale, it's going to make your company incredibly more powerful.
You talked about setting up the meetings internally. How do you efficiently work that internally with your company so that everybody is on the same page? Because you say meetings, everybody hates meetings.
Yeah.
But how do you create that to be an efficient process where everybody comes in, does their job, and understands what they're doing when they're going out?
Yeah, I mean, I hate meetings.
Yeah,
I feel like
does.
You know, I feel like actually when there's companies, you know, that have meetings, the first thing I think of is like, let's actually count how much this meeting is costing based on like salary and time, and just like throw it out there and you know, people will be surprised, right? You have a meeting with like 100 people from Microsoft for like an hour, or like on an email thread with some of our startup's customers. Like, yeah, this half an hour meeting just cost like $100,000 in salary, for example, right? Mm-hmm. You're like, holy shit, like I didn't get that much value from this meeting, right? And all of a sudden, then these meetings start becoming more and more efficient, right? You spend $100,000, no, you know. There's other amazing productivity tools that are emerging that are making these interactions between teams a lot more efficient. Of course, Slack, Zoom, you know, are Superhuman for email, are just increasing overall productivity. And so I think those traditional meetings, I remember, you know, when I was selling like Buzz, for example, and I was pitching even Microsoft. This is Steve Ballmer's Microsoft, not the current Microsoft, which I think is a lot better. And you go into a room in Redmond, and there would be, you know, 20 people, and I'd be with a co-founder or somebody, and of those 20 people, 15 would be on their laptops. And they're typing away. And by the way, they're not taking notes. They're like doing other stuff. It's like, why the hell are you in this meeting? Like, you have no purpose to be in this meeting. I found that so ironic. And so I think, when in doubt, like, you know, cut the meetings out, I think.
I like that saying.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. Tagline right there.
Tagline.
We're at a networking event right here. You know, people are going to be meeting each other, mingling. Partnerships are a big part, you know, making partnerships, collaborations with new businesses. What are some partnerships that have worked for you in any of your past ventures that has been successful, and why has it been successful?
So I think as a startup, you're already doing, time is your scarcest resource as a startup founder. You need to work on product market fit. You need to be selling and get in front of your customer as much as possible, because that dictates the success of your company. It's very hard for startups to partner with other startups. We usually don't recommend that. Unless they're a customer, a business development deal, an alliance, a partnership, it's usually bullshit, just to be honest, with startups, with other startups. You know, as you grow and you're post-Series A, post-Series B, you might have channel strategies and people running those strategies for distribution or for sales. But I think early on, you need to focus on one thing. You need to focus on how to get to product market fit, right? So I'm not a big fan of partnerships unless they help drive sales. Now, a lot of our like AI or enterprise SaaS companies use channel partners for sales. So that's a different story. These channel partners can be big consulting arms like Accenture, McKinsey, Deloitte, and those are fine because you're leveraging other people's sales teams to sell your product, and that's often a you know, worthwhile partnership to embark on. I think some of our companies, even as much as half of their revenue is from these channel partners.
Interesting.
But generally speaking, young startups partnering with young startups is never a good idea.
How about networking? You're known as the human Rolodex. If you Google him, human Rolodex, not bad. We're at a networking event. Tips for networking, growing your network.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. I have a 4-year-old now, and we're starting to play the game of memory. Do you guys remember that? With the cards, and you flip them over. I think that was that's a pretty impactful game to play, probably at any age. But I think power of networking is in making those highly relevant connections, and that's helped me become I think a good investor as well, where you're not just connecting, you know, two folks at random, which just, you know, can be a completely negative waste of time. It's always a double opt-in intro as well, but making these introductions so that you know, they're incredibly valuable, right? Like, my job when I meet an entrepreneur, and by the way, we invest, and most investors invest in a very small, tiny percentage of entrepreneurs they meet in total. Eniac's investing in less than 1% of everybody we meet, similar to most VCs. But every meeting that I take, I try to do one thing. I try to make one introduction of immense value. And I do that because, one, this entrepreneur is giving up an hour of their day to pitch me, and that's the least that we can do. But two, I remember when I was an entrepreneur, the best investors, the best folks that you would meet, would be able to see your business and be able to think of in memory that, you know, some person in their network that can be hugely impactful to this person's business. When I was at LocalResponse, for example, I pitched an investor who ended up not investing, but he introduced me to somebody that was just becoming the CRO of Twitter, and that was Adam Bain. And actually, that relationship was pivotal for the company. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget the investor. I'll never forget that moment. I'll never forget that time. That was hugely impactful for LocalResponse. He didn't have to do it. He didn't have to make that intro. He didn't invest in the company. But that's something, you know, you can call it karma, whatever. I call it just trying to help fellow entrepreneurs. But I think that game of memory is really important. And by the way, the more connections that you can make, there's a computer science term or a law called Metcalfe's law, right? Which is the size of a network is grows exponentially with each node. And the more times you can keep these nodes warm, the bigger exponentially this network grows. And by the way, all nodes are happy to get relevant connections. Like you'd be surprised, the CEO of Pepsi's very happy, CEO of MasterCard, who's a friend, Ajay Banga, is very happy to meet an innovative startup at any time of the day. You'd be surprised if it's relevant for his business. And so I'm very happy to have a platform now to do that. But I think I've been doing that, since I was an entrepreneur, just connecting folks and scaling that game of memory that I was playing as a kid, I guess, in real life.
It's a good analogy.
And then you can tell, it's interesting in Eniac, we all have our own personalities, and Myers-Briggs, you can tell I'm a little bit more of a ENFP, an extrovert. But I think that's been helpful in the networking context, because I derive energy from other people, whereas half my partners absolutely hate being here right now. They're like, that's your thing,
Sure.
because it eats away at their energy. And by the way, not everybody is an extrovert, at all. But I think you can also be a good networker as an introvert, And it doesn't mean you're out every night. You don't have to be, You can network on Twitter. You can network, by the way. My partners Vic and Hadley more than Vic is an introvert, and he's very thoughtful about pieces that he publishes, whether it's on Twitter or Medium or our podcast, right? That's his way of networking, because he's creating what we call this flypaper you put out there, and all of a sudden you find incredible entrepreneurs that are attracted to what you're talking about, and they come to you. And that's his way of networking. And so I think, there's